Content warning. This episode deals with the judicial and criminal case involving sensitive subject matter. Listener discretion is advised for those under 18. Welcome to the first episode of the documentary series, The Epstein Files: Roots of a Nightmare. Today, we will begin a journey into the depths of one of the most complex and controversial cases of the 21st century. A case that, even years later, reveals new dimensions every week. Let's start with a simple question. Who is Jeffrey Epstein? A successful financier? A criminal defendant? An intelligence asset? Perhaps all of these. Perhaps none. Perhaps something far beyond what we have thought until today. In this 30-part series, we will try to peel back the layers of this case one by one. Not based on rumors, not based on conspiracy theories, but based on documents. Documents released in courts, reports published by reputable journalists, and interviews conducted by the victims themselves. February 20th, 2026. 6 years have passed since August 10th, 2019, the day Jeffrey Epstein died in his cell at the Manhattan Correctional Center. Or perhaps it's better to say, the day his body was found in his cell, because many still doubt the official narrative. But let's not start from the end. Let's start from the beginning. From the day Epstein was born. From his family. From the neighborhood where he grew up. Because if we want to understand why this case became so complicated, we must know the roots. In the first episode, we go to the roots. Brooklyn in the 50s. Dalton School in the 70s. Wall Street in the 80s. And the first mansions and the first complaints in the 90s. Before we begin, let me make one thing clear. Everything you hear in this episode is based on documented sources. Its sources are clear. If I refer to a theory somewhere, I will explicitly say that this is a theory and there is no definitive proof. This is the least we can do to respect the victims of this case. Okay, let's go to Brooklyn. January 20th, 1953. Jeffrey Edward Epstein was born in the Sag Harbor neighborhood of Coney Island, Brooklyn. An area where, in those years, the working and middle classes lived. Neither poor nor wealthy. Completely ordinary. His father, Seymour Epstein, worked for the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, gardening and maintaining public green spaces. His mother, Paula, was a homemaker and later worked at an insurance agency. According to a 2018 Miami Herald report, the Epstein family lived in a small apartment on West 27th Street. A simple life, without luxuries. But little Jeffrey had one fundamental difference from children his age: extraordinary mathematical intelligence. Teachers soon noticed that this boy had a strange talent for mathematics. So much so that he skipped 2 grades. At 16, he graduated from Lafayette High School in Brooklyn. This is while most of his classmates were 18 years old. After high school, he went to Cooper Union University, a prestigious university in Manhattan that gave scholarships to talented students. But he didn't stay there long. After a few semesters, he transferred to New York University, and again left it unfinished. Important point: Jeffrey Epstein never received a university degree. This has been confirmed by official university documents. In a 2019 interview with the New York Times, a former classmate said, Jeffrey always talked about doing something big without a college degree, as if he wanted to prove a degree wasn't necessary. And he really did prove it. But how? A 16-year-old with high mathematical intelligence, without a university degree, from an average Brooklyn family. What doors open for such a person? In the ordinary world, perhaps a simple clerical job. But fate had charted a different course for Epstein. The year 1974. Epstein is 21 years old. And suddenly, to everyone's surprise, he is hired as a math and physics teacher at one of New York's most prestigious private schools, the Dalton School. The Dalton School is located on East 89th Street in Manhattan, where the children of America's wealthiest families study. Families whose names are on the Forbes list. How does a 21-year-old without a university degree reach such a position? This is where an important name comes in: Donald Barr. Donald Barr was the headmaster of the Dalton School at the time. But Barr wasn't just a school principal. He was a former officer of the OSS, the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, which later became the CIA. Barr had a long history in intelligence and security. His son later became the U.S. Attorney General, William Barr, the same person who played a key role in political events during the Trump era. Now the question is, how did Donald Barr get to know the young Epstein? Official sources have no clear answer. But 2019 investigations by the Washington Post pointed out that Barr probably played a key role in Epstein's entry into Dalton. According to Dalton School documents, Barr resigned from his position in February 1974, and his departure was completed in the summer of that year. Epstein began teaching in September 1974. So, Barr probably wrote a recommendation for Epstein or paved the way for his entry before leaving. This was Epstein's first encounter with the world of the wealthy. He was now standing in a classroom where his students were the children of America's most powerful people. He stayed at Dalton for 3 years. From 1974 to 1977. 3 years that later proved to be fateful. Not only because of getting to know wealthy families, but also because of a simple event: parent-teacher conferences. In one of these meetings, Epstein so impressed the father of one of the students that the man introduced him to Alan Greenberg. Alan Greenberg was the CEO of one of the largest investment banks on Wall Street, Bear Stearns. This introduction was the turning point in Epstein's life. From a simple teacher in Brooklyn, he now had a foot in the door on Wall Street, a place where big money moves. Years later, in a rare interview, Epstein admitted, "When I went to Bear Stearns, I didn't even know what stocks were or what bonds looked like." With this same ignorance, in less than 4 years, he became one of the youngest limited partners in the history of Bear Stearns. How is such a leap possible? There are 2 theories. The first theory is extraordinary financial intelligence. His former colleagues at Bear Stearns say Epstein had a strange ability to identify financial patterns and optimize investments for the wealthy. He could stare at numbers for hours and see patterns that others couldn't see. The second theory is something beyond Wall Street. Investigative reports by the BBC and the New York Times have pointed out that Epstein may have had another role from the very beginning. Perhaps an intermediary. Perhaps raising capital for specific projects. Perhaps even connections with intelligence services. The interesting point is this: at Bear Stearns, Epstein didn't work as an ordinary trader, but as a special consultant to the wealthy. He worked for those whose money was so vast that their names never appeared in the media. But this part of Epstein's life suddenly ends with an incident. The year 1981. Epstein is let go from Bear Stearns. The official reason? He later said in court, violation of securities regulations known as Reg D. For an ordinary person, this was the end of the road. But for Epstein, it was the beginning of a new chapter. He not only survived, but became even wealthier. How? The answer is summed up in one sentence. He founded his own company. The mysterious company. A financial consulting firm with a catchy slogan, "I only work with clients who have assets over $1 billion. Only billionaires." And he claimed to accept only one client. Later it became clear that the number of his clients was indeed limited, but who was that one client? To date, the only billionaire client of Epstein's that has been officially identified is one person, Leslie Wexner, founder of the Victoria's Secret brand and Elle Brands Company. Leslie Wexner was one of the giants of the fashion and retail industry in the 80s and 90s. His company managed brands like Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, and The Limited. His wealth at that time reached over $5 billion. The relationship between Epstein and Wexner is one of the strangest financial relationships in history. In July 1991, Wexner granted Epstein full financial power of attorney. That is, Epstein could sign checks on Wexner's behalf, buy property, take out loans, and make financial decisions. This authority continued until 2007. In 1989, Wexner had bought a mansion in Manhattan at 9 East 71st Street for $13.2 million. In 1996, he transferred this property to Epstein for free. In 2011, the transfer became official, and later courts valued this property at around $77 million in 2019. Let's pause here for a moment. You might ask yourself, why would anyone give such authority to another person? That's a good question. Let me explain it this way. Imagine you have a large company, thousands of employees, millions of customers. One day, a man is introduced to you who has neither a university degree nor a brilliant financial track record. But he speaks with such confidence and mastery that he seems to know everything. He tells you, "I can multiply your money. You just need to trust me." What would you do? Wexner trusted him. A trust that cost him $46 million. Or maybe it wasn't a cost. Maybe this amount was the price of something else. Something that hasn't been revealed yet. Epstein also exploited this connection in another way. He introduced himself as a global talent scout for Victoria's Secret. This cover gave him access to hundreds of young girls and women in the modeling industry. And that $77 million mansion that Wexner gave to Epstein was later searched by police. The result? In every room, every bathroom, and every bedroom, hidden surveillance cameras were installed. This mansion wasn't just a house, it was an operations center. A place where many victims later came and went. A place where recorded images of famous faces became Epstein's tools of power. The first warning signs. Now think about this. A man with several properties in different parts of the world, a $77 million mansion in Manhattan, and claiming friendship with the most powerful people in the world. This is the image Epstein constructed of himself in the 90s. But what was happening behind this image? In 1996, the first signs appeared. A 17-year-old girl went to the Florida police and complained about inappropriate treatment by Epstein. Her complaint was registered, but it went nowhere. Why? Because Epstein had good lawyers. And money. Lots of money. This pattern continued for years. Complaints that were filed, cases that were closed, and Epstein who continued on his path. The year 2005. Palm Beach, Florida. A woman calls the police. Her teenage daughter told her that a wealthy man named Jeffrey Epstein paid her to bring other girls to his mansion. Local police begin the investigation. What they find is beyond their imagination. Detectives realize that dozens of teenage girls frequented Epstein's mansion. some only once, some many times. Almost all of them came from poor or troubled families. Girls looking for money or attention. How did Epstein find these girls? He had a network of intermediaries, friends, acquaintances, and most importantly, he himself directly approached schools and youth centers. The Palm Beach police investigation reached the point where they realized Epstein wasn't just a defendant, but a professional organizer. He had a program for the girls, first money, then gifts, then introductions to his wealthy friends, and finally, photos and videos. In 2006, police obtained a warrant to search Epstein's mansion. What was the result? The discovery of hundreds of images later presented as evidence in court. Epstein was arrested. But this was just the beginning of the story. Epstein's lawyer stepped in. A team of America's best lawyers. They proposed to the prosecutor, let's make a deal. Epstein pleads guilty to 2 counts of acceptance, serves 13 months in prison, and the case is closed. The prosecutor agreed. This became known as the deal of the century. Why? Because under Florida law, Epstein should have been registered as a sex offender and victims had the right to be informed of the legal proceedings. But none of this happened. Epstein went to prison. But not an ordinary prison. He had a special wing. He could go out for hours and work in his office. It later became known that during this time, he continued his activities. The mystery of protection. In 2019, when Epstein was arrested again, the then prosecutor, Jeffrey Berman, said, "This man ran an organized network. He selected his victims from among the most vulnerable teenagers." But the main question is, why was the 2008 deal made? Who is behind the scenes? Let's look at an important document. In 2018, the Miami Herald conducted extensive research on the Epstein case. They found that Alexander Acosta, the then prosecutor in Florida, personally oversaw the 2008 deal. Acosta later became the U.S. Secretary of Labor in the Trump administration. Why did Acosta accept such a deal? He said in a congressional hearing, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and should not be subjected to severe prosecution." This sentence is important. Very important. If Epstein belonged to intelligence, then he wasn't just an ordinary defendant. He was an asset. Intelligence assets are not sent to long prison terms, because they might talk. Here we reach one of the most controversial parts of the case. Epstein's connection to intelligence services. Documents released in 2024 show that in the 80s, Epstein had close connections with several individuals who had a history of cooperation with the CIA and Mossad. One of these individuals was Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Robert Maxwell was a major publisher and billionaire. But more importantly, he was accused of collaborating with Mossad. In 1991, Robert Maxwell died under suspicious circumstances on his yacht near the Canary Islands, a death still shrouded in mystery. After Robert Maxwell's death, Epstein became close to his daughter Ghislaine. Ghislaine, who later became his main accomplice, was his link to the world of intelligence and politics. Now look at this chain. Epstein finishes high school at 16. Without a university degree, he becomes a teacher at an elite school. Without financial knowledge, he becomes a partner at Bear Stearns. Without personal capital, he becomes a consultant to billionaires. And when he's arrested, he's released with a strange deal. Is this pattern coincidental? In 2019, Epstein was arrested again. This time the charges were more serious. The judge set bail at $77 million. Epstein was awaiting trial at the Manhattan jail. And then something happened that changed everything. August 10, 2019. Epstein was found dead in his cell. Cause of death: suicide by hanging. This was the official report of the New York Medical Examiner. But many questions remained unanswered. The cameras opposite his cell that night were broken. His cellmate had been suddenly transferred hours before his death. The guards that night were working overtime and were never punished. Documents related to his death were classified. Epstein's brother, Mark, hired a team of independent doctors to examine the body. The result? There was evidence inconsistent with suicide. But the prosecutors closed the case. In November 2025, the U.S. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. In January 2026, over 3 million documents from this case were released. Documents including emails, notes, and classified reports. These documents showed that Epstein was in contact with dozens of famous figures, from Prince Andrew to Bill Clinton, from Donald Trump to Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel. More interestingly, there were emails exchanged between Epstein and Ehud Barak. Barak was forced to resign from his positions after these emails were published. Summary and analysis. Okay, let's review what we know so far. All of this is documented. 1. Epstein came from an ordinary Brooklyn family. 2. Without a university degree, he became a teacher at an elite school. 3. Without financial knowledge, he became a partner at Bear Stearns. 4. He was fired and started a consulting firm for billionaires. 5. His only known client, Leslie Wexner, gave him a $77 million mansion full of hidden cameras. 6. Epstein introduced himself as a talent scout for Victoria's Secret. 7. The first complaints were filed in the 90s, but were ignored. 8. In 2008, he was released from prison with a strange deal. 9. In 2019, he was arrested again and died in prison. 10. His death occurred under suspicious circumstances, and the documents were classified. What is this pattern? A pattern of unexpected leaps, strange access, and unusual protection. No one rises on Wall Street without financial knowledge unless they provide something else. No one becomes a teacher at an elite school without a track record unless there's a background story. But the most important question that remains unanswered so far: where did Epstein's real wealth come from? Billionaires don't write checks for financial advice. They buy something they can't buy elsewhere. A theory that must be taken seriously, according to numerous investigative reports, including documents published by Tara Palmieri in the Broken podcast. One of Epstein's guards named Igor Zinoviev warned the victim's lawyer, Brad Edwards, "You don't know who you're dealing with. Jeffrey is watching you. You better be very careful." Edwards asked, "Who am I dealing with?" And Zinoviev quietly replied, "The CIA." This claim was not made in court, but Zinoviev also gave more details. In 2008, when Epstein was in custody, he was taken to CIA headquarters in Virginia. Epstein attended a private class at the CIA and was given a book with handwritten notes there. If this is true, it means Epstein wasn't just a billionaire, but an intelligence asset. And intelligence assets are not sent to prison. Now, let's go a step further. If Epstein was an intelligence asset, then his network of contacts wasn't just simple friendships. This network was an intelligence network. Prince Andrew wasn't just a friend, he was an intelligence target. Bill Clinton wasn't just an acquaintance, he was a contact. And his island wasn't just a vacation property, it was an operation site. In those same January 2026 documents, there are emails showing Epstein was in contact with intelligence officials from several countries. We cannot name these countries because the documents are still completely classified. But the pattern is clear. What did Epstein use the information he collected from victims and guests for? Did he sell it? Did he trade it? This is a question we may never get an answer to. But one thing is certain. If Epstein was just an ordinary defendant, he would never have received so much protection. Labor secretaries would never have made deals for him. He would never have died in prison without anyone being held accountable. In the next episode, we go to the 90s and 2000s. Epstein's network of contacts, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and most importantly, Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who was his main accomplice. Who is Ghislaine Maxwell? The daughter of Robert Maxwell, the controversial publisher who died under mysterious circumstances. How did Ghislaine meet Epstein? What role did she play in the network? And why did she defend him until the last moment? In the second episode, we answer these questions. We also go to the first victims who dared to complain. Women who were silent for years, but finally their voices were raised. And another important point, in the second episode, we examine new documents released in January 2026. Documents that have revealed the names of dozens of other famous figures. Some of these figures are still alive. Some have passed away. But they all have one thing in common. Their traces have been found in the Epstein case. Is your name in these documents? Maybe not. Maybe yes. But don't forget one thing. The Epstein case isn't just about famous people. It's about a system that allowed such a network to remain active for decades. About police inaction, about prosecutorial corruption, about media silence, about society's indifference. So until the next episode, I invite you to think about this. If this happened to teenage girls in Florida, it could happen to anyone. Anywhere where unchecked power exists, anywhere where money talks first, anywhere where the law is different for some, the possibility of this happening again exists. Our duty as human beings is not to forget, to question, to follow up, so that perhaps one day, no other Epstein can commit crimes for decades and ultimately die in a prison cell under suspicious circumstances without answering to all his victims. Thank you for being with us so far. The second episode will be released soon. And this is the end of the first episode of the documentary series, The Epstein Files: Roots of a Nightmare. In this episode, we started from Brooklyn in the 50s, reached Dalton School in the 70s, passed through Wall Street in the 80s, and arrived at the $77 million mansion and the first complaints in the 90s. A long path full of twists and turns, full of unanswered questions. And remember, this case is not closed yet. New documents are released every week. New facts are revealed every month. In this series, we try to stay updated. If an important document is released, we will definitely review it in future episodes. Until the next episode, stay healthy and seek the truth. And a few words about the sources for this episode. The majority of information in this episode is based on Miami Herald Investigations, 2018 to 2019. New York Times Reports, 2019 to 2026. Documents released by Florida and New York courts. Official interviews with victims in Netflix and BBC documentaries. And most importantly, newly released documents in January 2026 under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. All these sources are available to the public and you can review them yourself. And finally, thank you for being with us so far. I know the time is long, But this case is so complex and deep that it cannot be summarized in 20 minutes. So if you've stayed this long, it means you care about the truth. And that is valuable to us. In the second episode, hotter topics await you. Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the first victims who came forward. Until then, enjoy life and take care of yourself. Goodbye.